Meta. As you know, my name is David. I am the creator and host of CVS. In today's episode of Meta, I want to talk about Father Julio César Grassi, who is serving a 15-year term in prison for pedophilia, sex abuse of minors, something like that. I started to become interested in this Grassi case when some so-called Catholics mentioned it and sent me links to articles, web pages, and videos, in particular a video called Excerpt from Sex Abuse in the Church, the Code of Silence. This video is on a channel which is called Complicit Clergy, which obviously is biased against the Catholic clergy for whatever reason, whether legitimate or illegitimate. This particular channel that put out this video on September 5th of this year is obviously biased against the clergy and thinks that the clergy is complicit. So this is why I'm interested in Father Julio César Grassi, who, as I said, is serving a 15-year term now. The lawyer, Dr. Marcello Sansonetti, I reached out to him by email. I actually mentioned this in my previous CVS Meta episode, which is called Noah, St. Peter, and Pope Francis. So if you haven't listened to that, I recommend you go back and listen to it. And I also recommend that you check out part 3 of the interview I did with Christopher Agron on the 19th of September of this year, because he makes some pretty bold statements about the veracity of that documentary and different sources that quote from the Grassi document, this 5-volume document. I'm hoping that Christopher Agron will come back on my show and talk about his perspective. Has his perspective changed since he's read the letter of Dr. Sansonetti? Because I think his perspective should change on the Grassi case, if nothing else. The email that I sent to Dr. Sansonetti read as follows. Dear Sir, I am a faithful Catholic who converted from atheism in 2009. I love and respect Pope Francis and submit to him because he is the Vicar of Christ. Recently, some prominent ostensible Catholics are attacking the Pope and making grave accusations against him that are very damaging to the Pope's reputation. One popular attack is to say that he commissioned a large 4-volume defense of a convicted sex offender, Grassi, which blamed the victims. Your name appears on the covers of the alleged 4-volume set. Are these books real? Can you talk about them? If there are 2,800 pages of text, why are the enemies of the Church quoting only a small handful of phrases to malign you and the Pope and the Church hierarchy? I find the accusations implausible. I do not believe that the Pope had any ill will at that time or ever, but my attempts to convince the so-called conservative Catholics who are in open rebellion against the Pope fall on deaf ears. Please reassure me, if you can, that the Holy Father, who was Archbishop Bergoglio at the time of the Grassi case, had only the most upright motives. I trust that you too are a good man and would not want to condone evil of any kind. I have no reason to doubt your integrity and your character, and I am saddened that so many who call themselves Catholic are willing to sully the reputation of men they have never met. Thank you for your precious time, and may God bless you and yours now and always. Sincerely, David Ross. And I sent him a link to that excerpt from the French so-called documentary. My email was sent on October 11th, 2018 at 11:31 a.m. But that's what this episode is about. This episode is about the Grassi case, and in particular, the letter from Dr. Sansonetti. So let's get right to it.
Buenos Aires, 16 de octubre, 2018. Estimado señor David Ross, le agradezco su mensaje. Permítame, por favor, responder en mi lengua materna.
Okay, so in this first part of his letter, it's just the introduction. Buenos Aires, October 16th, 2018. Dear Mr. David Ross, I appreciate your message. Allow me please to respond in my mother tongue.
En principio, quisiera aclararle que yo no me siento autorizado a hablar ni públicamente ni con terceros en privado sobre el encargo que me hizo el entonces arzobispo de Buenos Aires y presidente de la Conferencia Episcopal Argentina, Cardenal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, hoy Papa Francisco. Para hacer esto, yo debería contar con autorización del actual presidente de la Conferencia Episcopal Argentina.
So he begins now the body of his letter by clarifying that he doesn't feel authorized to speak, either in public or to third parties in private, about this assignment that he had under the Archbishop of Buenos Aires and the president of the Argentinian Episcopal Conference, Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio. And he goes on to say that in order to speak publicly or in private about certain details, he would need the authorization from the current president of that conference.
Pero algunas aclaraciones sí puedo hacer, especialmente las relativas a ciertas frases que lucen en su mensaje, que distorsionan la realidad de algunas circunstancias de hecho.
Even though I can't discuss in detail some of the specifics of the case, he is willing and able to clarify some of the misconceptions and distortions that I presented to him in my initial email.
En primer lugar, constituye al menos una errónea formulación el decir que el entonces presidente de la Conferencia Episcopal Argentina me haya encargado una defensa, ni una gran defensa, ni tampoco una pequeña. Él me encargó un dictamen. En un dictamen, un jurista debe expresar su opinión a su leal saber y entender, y frente a terceros también debe guardar secreto de la opinión expresada ante la persona que encarga el trabajo. En este caso, ocurrió que la Iglesia encargó numerosas copias, no sé precisar el número, que recibieron acaso todos o la mayor parte de los obispos de mi país, y probablemente también el Vaticano, ya antes de que Bergoglio se transformara en papa.
So he goes on to say here that this is at least an erroneous formulation, to say that the president of the Episcopal Conference requested a defense. It wasn't a great defense, it wasn't a small defense, it wasn't a defense at all. He commissioned an opinion. In an opinion, a jurist must express his opinion to the best of his knowledge and understanding. There's a certain level of confidentiality in the work, but in this particular case, it just so happens that the Church commissioned numerous copies of the legal opinion. And he says he doesn't know exactly how many, but that they were received by most, if not all, of the bishops in Argentina. And probably also by the Vatican. And this was even before Bergoglio became Pope Francis.
También es inexacta la expresión encargó 4 volúmenes, pues el encargo consistía en que yo emitiera mi opinión. No había un número predeterminado de volúmenes, tal como lo daría a entender esa expresión. El número de volúmenes devino de la gran cantidad de detalles que en general yo analizo en trabajos de esta índole. Y, por lo demás, no se trata de 4 volúmenes, sino de 5. El dictamen en conjunto tiene 3 tomos, pero el tomo segundo fue subdividido en 2A, 2B1 y 2B2, por lo cual ese tomo insumió 3 volúmenes. Yo determiné la cantidad de volúmenes según fui conociendo detalles de toda la causa, no es que me hubiera trazado a mí mismo un plan previo de, haré esto en X número de volúmenes. En el contenido, hay una gran cantidad de transcripciones de las audiencias orales y de muchos otros documentos, también extensos razonamientos, con confrontación del material probatorio de la causa.
So what he's saying is it's inaccurate to say that 4 volumes were ordered, because he was just given a task to issue an opinion, a legal opinion. There was no predetermined number of volumes. The number of volumes came from the fact that there were a large number of details that he had to analyze in a work of this nature. And furthermore, it's not 4 volumes, but 5 volumes. If you look in the mainstream media, you will always see 4 volumes, but it's 5 volumes. Now, in reality, there are 3 volumes, but volume 2 is subdivided into part A and part B, and part B is subdivided into part B1 and part B2. So basically, you have volume 2 with part 2A, Part 2B1 and Part 2B2. And the work is large because there are a large number of transcripts, oral hearings, and many other documents, and a lot of reasoning, confronting the material in a probative way, trying to get to the root of the matter and find out what's going on. That's why the document is so voluminous.
En esta clase de trabajos, yo sé cuándo lo comienzo, pero no cuándo habré de terminarlo. De hecho, en este caso, el estudio en su conjunto insumió un poco más de 3 años, a pesar de que, a excepción de las clases universitarias y de clases de posgrado en el interior de mi país o en Paraguay y en Chile, no me ocupaba, a ese entonces, de ningún otro asunto profesional.
He's saying when he starts a work like that, he knows when he begins, but he doesn't know when he's going to finish it. So in this case, it took him a little more than 3 years of work, despite the fact that, with the exception of university classes, he was engaged at that time in no other professional commitments. So it's a pretty serious engagement.
Por otra parte, si es que comprendo bien su mensaje en inglés, usted se expresa en plural, al igual que muchos medios de comunicación, con la palabra víctimas, como si el acusado hubiera sido condenado por más de un caso. Él fue condenado por 2 supuestos hechos referidos a un solo acusador. Yo prescindiré aquí de la palabra víctima. Las acusaciones de otros 2 acusadores fueron rechazadas, es decir, que, en esa medida, el acusado fue declarado inocente en todas las instancias. Esto es algo que los medios de comunicación nunca resaltan, aunque tales medios habían sostenido previamente, por diversas vías, la veracidad de todas las imputaciones. Hubo un solo medio de prensa, ámbito financiero, que afirmaba la inocencia del imputado. De cualquier modo, yo no me rijo por lo que dice la prensa.
So it's starting to get interesting here. He's talking about how, like many of those in the media, I used the word victims, plural. But he was convicted of 2 alleged facts, but these refer to a single accuser or plaintiff. And he says he'll dispense with the word victim. This is very, very important. He says there is a single accuser for which he was convicted, but he does not agree that that accuser is a victim. He goes on to say that the accusations of the 2 other accusers were rejected, that to that extent the defendant was declared innocent in all instances. This is something that the media never highlights, although such media had previously held by various means the veracity of all imputations. In other words, what he's saying here is that the media was happy to claim the veracity of all imputations, openly and publicly. That was good business for the media. But when it turned out that 2 of the accusers were rejected completely as having lied and given false testimony, as we'll see, the media didn't report it. It's not good business. It doesn't sell as well. He goes on to say that there was only one media outlet, Ámbito Financiero, that affirmed the innocence of the accused. And he ends this paragraph by saying that in any case, I don't rule because of what the press says. I don't make my decisions based on what the media reports. He's not interested in the mainstream media and what sells their newspapers or their online publications. He's not interested. He's interested in the truth.
Mi dictamen debía referirse tanto a las acusaciones por las cuales el acusado había sido absuelto, como a la acusación por la cual había sido condenado. Yo podía haber emitido cualquier opinión, con la sola carga de dar mi fundamentación. Para dar tan solo un ejemplo, yo podría haber considerado que las absoluciones fueran erróneas, y, a la vez, la condena, falsa o bien cualquier otra combinación. No tenía un encargo relativo a cuál debía ser el resultado de mi opinión, y, como regla completamente general, no acepto encargos de dictámenes que tengan que tener preconfigurada una respuesta determinada. Soy un hombre mayor, de 67, casi 68 años. Y cuando ese trabajo me fue encargado, yo estaba pronto a cumplir 60 años. Usted comprenderá que no es una altura de la vida para echar a perder la reputación que uno pueda tener como jurista, para escribir un dictamen jurídico con un resultado preestablecido. Yo he emitido una opinión que, como explico en el epílogo de la obra, inserto en el tomo 3, es, desde mi punto de vista, una opinión cuyo modo de estudio y fundamentación ha reducido la posibilidad de error a una cuantité negligeable, es decir, que no creo que pueda haberme equivocado en las grandes conclusiones, pues hice todos los controles racionalistas que estuvieron a mi alcance, con el mayor estudio posible de los detalles, en cuyo entrelazamiento suele alojarse la verdad. Si hubo pequeños errores de formulación en algunos volúmenes, en parte corregidos en volúmenes subsiguientes.
So here we have Dr. Sansonetti clarifying that the legal opinion he put together referred not only to that accusation for which Grassi had been convicted, but it referred also to the two accusations for which the defendant had been acquitted. This will become very important later on when I debunk that so-called documentary. He goes on to say that he could have issued any opinion, with the sole burden being that he gives his rationale. He says, I could have considered that the absolutions were wrong, and at the same time the sentence false, or any other combination. I did not have an assignment, he says, regarding what should be the result of my opinion. I do not accept commissions of opinions that have to have a certain response pre-configured. I am an older man, 67, almost 68 years old now, and when that job was commissioned, I was soon to turn 60. You will understand that it is not a time of life to spoil the reputation that one may have as a jurist, to write a legal opinion with a pre-established result. I have issued an opinion that, as I explain in the epilogue of the work, inserted in Volume 3, is, from my point of view, an opinion whose mode of study and foundation has reduced the possibility of error to a negligible quantity. I don't think I could be wrong in the major conclusions I draw, because I made all the rational controls that were within my reach, with the greatest possible study of the details, wherein is lodged, albeit in a convoluted manner, the truth. And he says, in parenthesis, yes, there were small errors of formulation in some volumes, partly corrected in subsequent volumes. So, of course, there's human error that creeps into these things. He's not denying that, but he's saying that his major conclusion has a negligible margin of error. He is not wrong. He does not think that he was wrong in his opinion. To this day, he believes that he is right. He looked at the facts, he unraveled the facts, and he came to a conclusion. He presented that conclusion. He was not under pressure to come to that conclusion. He would not have accepted a commission to come to a certain pre-configured conclusion.
A ese respecto hay que tener bien en claro que una cosa es defender a un acusado en un juicio y otra función muy diferente, emitir una opinión como jurista independiente. Aun cuando yo ejerzo poco la profesión de abogado, si se trata de asumir una defensa, uno tiene que esforzarse por la mejor posición posible para el defendido. Algo completamente diferente es evacuar un dictamen. Pues un dictamen es la emisión de una opinión racionalmente sostenible desde el punto de vista de la ciencia jurídica. Yo me he dedicado preferentemente a la vida académica, es decir, a ser profesor e investigador, de Derecho Penal Material y Derecho Procesal Penal. Fui becario del Instituto de Cooperación Iberoamericana y de la Fundación Alexander von Humboldt. Soy profesor de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, como profesor ordinario, desde 1986. También soy profesor honorario de una universidad del interior de mi país y profesor de universidades privadas. Me he doctorado en la Universidad de Buenos Aires y en la Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Un tercer título de doctor, pero honoris causa, me fue otorgado por una universidad privada en 2010.
It must be understood, he says, that it's one thing to defend a defendant in a trial, and a very different function to express an opinion as an independent jurist, and that's what he was doing here. He was not defending a defendant. He was expressing an opinion, a legal opinion, as an independent jurist. He says when it is a matter of making a defense, one has to strive for the best possible position for the defendant. It is completely different to evacuate an opinion. For a legal opinion is the emission of a rationally sustainable opinion from the point of view of legal science. He says, I have dedicated myself preferentially to academic life, that is, to be a professor and researcher of material criminal law and criminal procedure law. And he goes on to list a whole bunch of qualifications. He's a fellow at the Institute of Ibero-American Corporation and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. He's a professor at the University of Buenos Aires as an ordinary professor since 1986. He's also an honorary professor at another university and a professor at private universities. He has a doctorate from the University of Buenos Aires and the University of Madrid. A third doctor's degree was awarded by a private university in 2010. He's not someone that's going to stray from legal science, and it's not the place of an independent jurist to defend a defendant. It's the place of an independent jurist to give an objective rationale for his legal opinion. And as he said in the previous paragraph, if there had been a bias, if there had been pressure to come to a certain conclusion, he would not have accepted the commission.
Volviendo a otras imprecisiones del amable mensaje que usted me envió, no se trata solo de 2800 páginas, sino como sigue: tomo 1, 423 páginas, tomo 2A, 646 páginas, tomo 2B1, 659 páginas, tomo 2B2, 740 páginas, tomo 3, 729 páginas. En total, entonces, un estudio de 3197 páginas. No creo que haya alguien, de los que critican a Papa Francisco o a mi persona, que haya leído toda la obra, ni siquiera una parte relativamente extensa. Los dos casos por los cuales el acusado fue absuelto están estudiados en los tomos 1 y 3, respectivamente. El caso por el cual el acusado fue condenado está estudiado en el tomo 2, en sus 3 volúmenes.
So, in another paragraph, he talked about the number of volumes. Here, he's going to talk about the number of pages. He says it's not merely 2,800 pages, but 3,197 pages. Volume 1 is 423 pages. Volume 2A is 646 pages. Volume 2B1 is 659 pages. Volume 2B2 is 740 pages. Volume 3 is 729 pages, making that total of 3,197 pages. Okay, that's a clarification of the quantity, and now we're going to talk about quality. He says, I don't think there is anyone of those who criticize Pope Francis or myself who has read the whole work. He says, I don't think they've even read a relatively large part of the work, those who criticize Pope Francis and myself. This is what he says. So it's really interesting to hear it straight from the independent jurist that he doesn't think anyone who criticizes them or this work has read it in any significant part. And finally, what he says in this paragraph is that the 2 cases for which the defendant was acquitted are studied in volumes 1 and 3, respectively, and the case for which the accused was actually convicted, rightly or wrongly, and he thinks wrongly, is studied in volume 2, and that volume 2, of course, is split into 3, as mentioned above.
Su mensaje concluye con su preocupación por la pregunta de si el entonces cardenal Bergoglio tenía los motivos más rectos. Al respecto, quiero aclararle que yo no soy quien para juzgar los motivos de quien me encarga un trabajo, mucho menos los de una alta autoridad eclesiástica. Como regla general no le pregunto a quien me encarga un trabajo cuáles son sus motivos, ni correspondería, en principio, que yo se lo preguntase. Tampoco por el hecho de que alguien exprese motivos uno puede tener la seguridad de que esos motivos sean verdaderos, aunque, en principio, no soy de dudar de la palabra de quien me encarga algo, si es que me expone sus motivos. Yo sí puedo decirle que no me consta nada, del cardenal Bergoglio ni del hoy Papa Francisco, que a mí pueda sugerirme un comportamiento criticable, ni con relación al encargo que él me hizo a mí ni con relación a otros asuntos. Pero, como le digo más arriba, no tengo ninguna autoridad especial como para evaluar su comportamiento.
So now he addresses this question from my email where I ask about the righteous motives of then Cardinal Bergoglio. And he simply says, honestly, that he can't read the heart. He doesn't know the motives. He says, in this regard, I would like to clarify that I'm not the one to judge the motives of whoever entrusts me with a job, much less those of a high ecclesiastical authority. As a general rule, I do not ask whoever asks me for a job what their motives are, nor would it be appropriate in principle for me to ask them. And even if they tell me their reasons, I can't be sure that those reasons are true. Although in principle, I'm not to doubt the word of whoever gives me something if it exposes their reasons. So basically he's saying he gives the benefit of the doubt, but he can't be sure. He goes on to say, I can tell you that I do not know anything about Cardinal Bergoglio or Pope Francis that could suggest to me any behavior that is worthy of criticism, neither in relation to this work that he had me do or in relation to other matters. But as I said above, I have no special authority to evaluate behavior. So he's being very rational and very moderate and very sane when he says, I can't read the heart, but I have no reason to think that there's anything untoward.
Por último, le aclaro que para leer mi dictamen no hace falta ser creyente. El texto es un tratamiento crítico racionalista, en el sentido de Karl Popper, del material que yo tenía que estudiar, tal como han sido otros trabajos míos anteriores, al igual que siguen ese estilo mis obras de producción o bien de divulgación científicas. No todo texto tiene el mismo nivel de profundidad, pero el estilo, sí es relativamente constante. Dicho de otro modo, para leer ese dictamen es indiferente que uno sea católico, de otra religión, agnóstico o decididamente ateo. La opinión sobre la verdad en determinado asunto de la vida en esta tierra tiene que ser independiente de las creencias religiosas que cada uno pueda tener y ser expuesta en una forma de diálogo que también pueda ser aceptado por el lego y el ateo.
So here he's just clarifying that you don't have to be a believer to read his opinion. The text is a critical rationalist treatment, he says, in the sense of Karl Popper, the philosopher. And he goes on to say that this is his approach in all his writings, whether about popular science or whatever the case may be. Even though he doesn't have the same depth of expertise, his approach is always relatively constant in this way, in seeking objectivity. He goes on to say, in other words, to read that opinion, that legal opinion, it is a matter of indifference if you're Catholic or of another religion or agnostic or even a full-blown atheist. Because truth is truth, basically.
Si usted me hace llegar una dirección postal, yo tal vez podría al menos intentar que la Iglesia Argentina le remita una copia, así fuese fotocopiada, de los 5 volúmenes, pero no es algo que yo pueda asegurarle que vaya a ocurrir. Cordiales saludos. Marcelo Sansonetti.
So finally, before signing off, he just says that if I send him my postal address, he could at least try to get the Argentinian church to send me a copy, a hard copy of the 5-volume work. And of course he says it's not something I can assure you will happen. I can't promise you anything, but I will at least try if you send me your postal address. So that's what I did. I sent him my postal address. So we'll see what happens. So I think it's pretty clear where Dr. Sansonetti stands on this issue. He's convinced of the innocence of Grassi. He makes that clear. Father Grassi is innocent. And I'm starting to believe that he is. And this brings me to my final point that I want to make in relation to that video, and I'll put the link below. The video called Excerpt from Sex Abuse in the Church, The Code of Silence. If you go to around 4 minutes, 45 seconds, you'll see the document with white text on a black background. I think it's been inverted just for stylistic reasons and maybe to add some gravitas to this flaky and flimsy argument. You can see at the top of the page, Tome 3. Okay, Tome 3 was one of the acquittals. He said, and I quote, "The 2 cases for which the defendant was acquitted are studied in volumes 1 and 3, respectively, and the case for which the accused was convicted is studied in volume 2 in its 3 parts." So how is it that we're supposed to be shocked and horrified by this accusation of false testimony and lies when the judge agreed that it was false testimony and lies, because it says right in the documentary, the Code of Silence, at 4 minutes 47 seconds, that's where I'm looking right now, I've got it paused on my screen, Tome 3, you can see it, Tome 3. And as Dr. Sansonetti said in his letter to me, this was already established. These acquittals were already accomplished. So what is the point of making a documentary that's supposed to damn Bergoglio when these quote-unquote victims were deemed by the court to be false victims, false, lying victims? And the sad thing is that this has been presented time and time again. Like I said in my last meta episode, you can see on various websites, so-called conservative Catholic websites, they're rehashing this lie that there was a defense put together in secret to undermine the victims and to defame the victims. But it's simply not true. It wasn't a defense, as Dr. Sansonetti clearly says in his letter to me. It was not a defense. It was an independent jurist hired to give an opinion. And the accusation against these so-called victims is substantiated by the judge and by the court. Now, could the court have erred? Of course. Of course the court could have erred, of course, but that's not my point. My point is that the people that made this documentary knew that the accusation of false testimony that they were presenting came from the third volume of a work, and that third volume had to do with false victims that gave false testimony. There's nothing sensational about this. But they're twisting it, they're taking it out of context, and they're making it seem as though the church, with some dirty lawyers, got together and tried to bash the victims of sexual abuse. It's just not the case. If it is the case, then the documentary makers and all these websites are doing a disservice by presenting false evidence, manipulated evidence, which comes from Volume 3, instead of quoting from Volume 2, which has to do with the charges that stuck, with the accuser whose allegations were upheld by the court. Are those allegations true? The independent jurist, the doctor of the law, says no. His doubt is negligible. And everything I've seen in the anti-Catholic Code of Silence, so-called documentary, leads me to believe that there's a manipulation taking place because it's sensational, it's salacious. Basically, sex sells. And you can't worship both God and money, so you have to take sides. I believe that Father Grassi worships God, and those that falsely accused him worship money or some other false god. So I think I've said enough for today. I'm really hoping that Christopher Agron will come back and discuss this with me. I don't see how he can maintain the position that he held during his part 3, the interview that I did of him, Christopher Agron part 3. If you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to it. We do discuss this Grassi case. I was not familiar with the Grassi case at the time. I'm only passingly familiar with it now, but everything, like I said, everything that I learn leads me to the conclusion that it's a joke. And it's a very sad joke because it could be an innocent man sitting in jail for 15 years for a crime that he did not commit. Does that mean he's completely innocent and he's not a sinner? No, of course not. But why do you want someone to rot in jail for a crime they did not commit? And everything I've learned leads me to believe that he is innocent. I could be wrong. It doesn't really matter if I'm wrong. My main point here is not that I'm right and that Grassi is innocent. That's not my main point. He may well be guilty. He may be getting away with murder because his crimes are much greater than what he's being accused of. But when we see sloppy journalism like this, where they're drawing things out of context, using Volume 3, which the judge agreed was false testimony, and saying, oh, Volume 3 said that the victims gave false testimony. Oh, they're bashing the victim. They're blaming the victim. That's just not true. It's just not true. There's nothing substantial from that 5-volume work that corroborates these so-called conservative Catholics that want to denigrate the character of our Holy Father. There's nothing that I've found that substantiates that. This is an independent jurist presenting an opinion without any duress. He was not coerced. He was not pressured. He sought the truth objectively, and he is convinced to this day that there's negligible doubt that Grassi is innocent, and I'm right there with him. I'm with Dr. Sansonetti. I'm with Grassi. I'm with Willette. I'm with Pope Francis. I hope you are too. That's it. We'll talk soon. Take care. God bless. So that was the end of the episode, but I'm going to add on a little epilogue here. It's been 3 days since I recorded this episode. I've just been working and trying to find time to edit it and get it online. But it just so happens that today, Christopher Agron, whom I've interviewed a couple of times recently, communicated to me that he is done. He's done with me. He doesn't appreciate my approach. And so we're done. He's unilaterally ended the friendship. So that's disappointing. It's a little bit surprising, I have to say, even though I'm subject to so much hatred and derision since my conversion, and there's so many people dropping me like flies because I defend Jesus Christ and His Holy Roman Catholic Church without apology, and I do so in a manner which is a little bit too extra, as they say. So I do understand, I rub most people the wrong way. I'm surprised my wife hasn't left me yet. She's a staunch, rabid anti-Catholic. And I thank her every day, that she hasn't left me, because a lot of people have ended their relationship with me. But I still have lots of friends. I have millions of friends, but most of them are in purgatory and heaven. I think here on earth I might have a very small handful of friends. It's hard to know. I don't even know if my wife is a true friend. It's hard to know. God only knows. And there's no point in worrying about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about being betrayed. I'm not worried about being disappointed by people. I welcome whatever happens. I pray every day to enjoy everything that happens, provided that I am able to enjoy it in a way that does not offend God. So when I was unfriended on Facebook by Christopher Agron today, I got a notification because I have an app on Facebook called Facebook Purity, which I've talked about before. So I just sent him a message and I sent him an email asking why. Why did you unfriend me? And he said, because people who lie about you aren't your friends. There's no space in my life for your immaturity. Well, okay. Immature, yes, okay. Guilty, I'm immature. But I didn't lie to you. When did I lie to you, Christopher? When did I lie to you? If I lied, it was unintentional. And if it's unintentional, it's not a lie. It's called an error. Right? And so he goes on to say that I've been misrepresenting his intentions with regard to the Pope, and that I'm assuming the worst about his intentions regarding the Pope. Well, yeah, I think it's natural to assume the worst when the worst is presented as facts, right? Like when it's presented as a fact that Bergoglio ordered the publication of a book that attacked the child victims of abuse, is that not the worst that we could say about the Pope? Is there something worse? So yes, I do assume the worst about your intentions regarding the Pope, Christopher Agron. Yes. Because it's hard not to. And all I've been stressing with you, my friend, is that you should pump the brakes, reconsider that you may be stirring things up, you may be adding fuel to the fire of hatred against Christ and His church and His vicar on earth. and that you may be unwittingly promoting the anti-Catholic agenda of Satan and all his minions. There are hordes of them. There are hordes of them. If you think that Satanism is a small niche religion, you're just wrong. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. As Anton LaVey said famously, it's the most popular religion. The selfishness of Satan is everywhere. It's contaminating all of us. That selfishness. There are two cities. The city of man and the city of God, and they're characterized by two loves. The love of self unto contempt of God, and the love of God unto contempt of self. The love of God unto contempt of self is holy. But the love of self unto contempt of God is unholy. It's of Satan. And so Anton LaVey was right that it is the most popular religion, and many Christians, if not most, are Satanists because of their love of self and to contempt of God. Now, before becoming a Catholic, I was a self-professed Satanist, an atheistic Satanist, but a Satanist nonetheless. And I was in that school of Anton LaVey. So I have a little bit of experience, a little bit more experience with Satanism than you do, Christopher Agron. And I think you would do well to respect my warning, my stern warning, which is very wholesome and very Catholic. Don't attack the Vicar of Christ. I think that's wholesome advice. Don't attack him. Even if, in the worst case scenario, the most horrible rumors about the Pope are true, don't repeat them. Don't publish them. Don't share them. I am insensitive and stupid, it's true, but I am not so insensitive that I wasn't aware of the fact that as I was defending the Pope to Christopher Agron during our many exchanges on Facebook Messenger, I'm sensitive enough that I clued into the fact that he was getting annoyed. Of course, I am stupid, but I'm not quite that stupid. So I knew that my very simple and wholesome advice was not going over too well. It wasn't being digested. It wasn't being processed in a way that gave that light bulb moment. Ding! Oh, he's the Pope. Maybe I should refrain from calumniating him. Maybe I should refrain from gossiping about him. Maybe I should refrain from sullying his reputation with these so-called facts. That message was not sinking in, so I tried to use an illustration to get my point across in very, very simple terms. So I wrote to Christopher once again in Messenger, and I said, let's imagine that your father, your biological father, had a bunch of enemies, and they put together a video. And what this video shows is your father in Amsterdam, walking along in the dark streets at night, and he's wearing a raincoat, and he's in the red light district. The video clearly shows this. This is a fact. In the red light district, you can see prostitutes sitting in the windows selling themselves to passers-by. So this is what the video shows in this hypothetical thought experiment. It shows Christopher Agron's father at night in the red light district ducking into the apartment of one of these prostitutes. A well-known prostitute, a popular one. So Christopher's father ducks into the apartment, and then the prostitute ducks behind the red velvet curtain in the display window, and the video cuts to morning outside the same apartment, and Christopher Agron's father exiting the apartment in the bright morning light, zipping up his fly and wiping what looks like red lipstick from around his mouth. So it's quite a colorful picture that I've painted of Chris's father, his biological father. Paints quite a picture. And in this hypothetical scenario, I asked him to play along and to concede that this video presents reality, it presents the facts. Okay, so it's not CGI, it's not staged, there's no double wearing hair and makeup to make him look like Christopher Agron's father. It actually is his father. He actually is in Amsterdam, in the red light district, walking into that apartment of the prostitute, and he does leave that same building in the morning. And he does zip up his fly, and he does wipe what looks like red lipstick from around his mouth. These are facts. In this hypothetical thought experiment, these are facts. Okay? Now, my advice to Christopher Agron is to not publish those facts, even though they're facts. They're facts which are very damaging to the reputation of his father. How can you not see that? It must be a willing blindness to say, well, it's only facts, and I'm just presenting the facts. And until he proves his innocence, I'm just going to present the facts. And why is he silent? Why is my father silent? I'm just presenting the facts. He hasn't responded. He won't say a word. Well, I see opposition here. I see division. I see rebellion. I see hatred. And I see lies. I see a lie in the presentation of these facts, these bare facts. I see a lie. And the lie is based on an organic truth, a deep truth about the relationship between father and son. A good father and the son. Does the son have warrant to present these facts, these objective facts, this video that was put together by his father's enemies? Does he have warrant to publish these facts? Yes or no? Assuming, again, in this hypothetical thought experiment, that the father is a good father. He's a good man. And that there's no reason to believe that he would seek the services of a prostitute when his wife is still alive, and even if his wife were dead. If he's a Catholic man who's faithful and he's good and has self-control, he will not be going to a prostitute. Not for the services that she is normally associated with. And there's that old joke, there's that old Irish joke about the guys at the pub across the street from the whorehouse, and a Protestant minister goes into the whorehouse, and they're, oh, the poor minister, he's fallen into sin again. So sad. And then sometime later, a rabbi goes into the same whorehouse. Oh, it's so sad. The rabbi is falling into sin. It's so sad. And then sometime later, their Catholic priest goes into the same whorehouse. And they're like, oh, it's so sad. The prostitute must be dying. And Father's going to give her last rites. So sad. Now, this joke is typically aimed at Catholics in order to unveil some sort of hypocrisy that, oh, well, let's assume the best for our own, but let's assume the worst for everyone else. And there is some truth to that does take place. But there's the other side of the coin, right? Which is that only the Catholic Church has the fullness of the truth, particularly when it comes to sexuality, sexual morality, marriage, and the family. Only the Catholic Church. So there is that to be considered, that it may not be that big of a stretch to say that that priest was going in with pure and wholesome intentions. I like to think so. I give him the benefit of the doubt. In this hypothetical world of the joke, the anti-Catholic joke, I like to give that priest the benefit of the doubt. But guess what? I also like to give the benefit of the doubt to the rabbi and to the Protestant minister. I do. I really do. Now, if it were some satanic gang member, drug dealer going in there, I would probably think that he's up to something shady, like selling drugs and or procuring the services of a prostitute. But nothing would surprise me. So the gangster might have good intentions and might have a wholesome mission in the whorehouse, and all three monotheists might have nefarious business in the whorehouse. Anything's possible. But my little illustration wasn't worthy of a response. And I find that sad. I think that if someone presented an illustration like that to me, I would know what to say. I would say that, yes, you're right. I made a mistake by presenting facts which are very damaging to our Holy Father, the Pope. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful in future, because the Holy Father is the vicar of Jesus Christ, who is God incarnate. So thank you, David, for your fraternal correction. And thank you for your lighthearted illustration with that colorful scene in Amsterdam, because now I get it. So thank you, and you just upgraded from friend to best friend forever. That's what I would have expected from a real Catholic. But he didn't respond, and the next communication I got from him was saying, people like you who lie aren't friends. There's no space in my life for your immaturity. So if you are listening to this, Christopher Agron, I just want to say, I never meant any harm. I only meant to defend the honor of the Holy Father. I never attacked you personally. If I suggested that you are satanic, it's not a dramatic revelation. I mean, if you don't know that you worship Satan, you're naive. You need to know that. You cannot go to heaven if you don't know yourself. And if you don't think that you are selfish and self-serving, if you don't think that you love yourself unto contempt of God, then you're naive. You need to have your eyes opened. The difference between those who go to hell and those who make it to heaven is that those who make it to heaven admit that they're weak, that they're selfish, that they're sinners, that they are sick, that they need a Savior, they need Jesus Christ. That's the only difference. It's not that the saints are some sort of Nietzschean Übermensch. We are all good by nature, but we are all evil by choice. And that means we're all Satanists. We're evil by choice. That's not from God. That is from Satan. When we are evil by choice, that is not from God. That is from Satan. So if you feel offended or outraged that I have said or implied in any way that you are a follower of Satan, and I'm just guessing here because I can't find anything specific that I said to you on social media or on email, but if you've listened to my podcast where I'm railing against these so-called conservative Catholics who are attacking the Pope, and you hear me making reference to the diabolical rebellion that infests the anti-Catholic, and if you feel that you're being clumped in with them, then the appropriate reaction is just thank me for reminding you. When the citizens of Athens tried and convicted Socrates, they asked him what they thought his punishment should be. And he said, have a parade in my honor and declare a holiday in my name, and build a large statue of me and place it in a prominent place in the town square. That's the punishment that is fitting for the services that I've rendered to you. And I say the same to you, Christopher Agron. Build a statue for me. Make a parade for me. If you have 4 kids, you can call the first one David, the second one Mary, the third one Andrew, and the fourth one Ross. I think that's a fitting recompense for my chastisement of your rebellion. That's what I would recommend. But we know how things turned out for Socrates. There was a majority that was able to convict Socrates, but when they voted the second time to determine the punishment, it was unanimous. Even those that had just moments ago declared him not guilty voted for the death penalty because of the speech that he gave. And so they killed him. I cry when I read that. I cry because he died for the truth. I think he was a saint. I think he was a Catholic saint. And St. Justin Martyr suggests that possibly he was. So, I went to confession today, and I made a point to confess, among other things, mishandling Christopher Agron, who is admittedly very young, and God only knows what he's been through in the military and in his family and in life in general. I don't know. I don't know him. So I give him the benefit of the doubt. But I went to confession and I mentioned that whatever I'd done, it wasn't agreeable to Christopher Agron. So if I had done anything that was not wholesome and charitable, I asked for forgiveness, although I couldn't think of anything other than just being annoying and pushy and insensitive and stupid. And so I asked Jesus Christ in the confessional to give me grace and pardon. And he did. I still don't know what I did wrong, but it doesn't really matter. I don't need to know. I'm sure I did something wrong. And may God help me to see more and more of the evil, the satanic, selfish evil that lurks in my heart and that was unleashed perhaps on Christopher Agron. I have no doubt. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of darkness. So I have no doubt that he saw something real. I just wish he would tell me what he saw, because when I ask him for clarification, I get silence. So the penance I was given for today's confession was to say a prayer of thanksgiving and to say the peace prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. So I've already done it. I've done my penance, but I want to say the prayer now to close. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.